Hello, this is Virtualis the Chess Noob, learning and having fun with chess. I really like playing the England Gambit against the Queen's Pawn opening. And one of the interesting things is that if you look at commentary on the internet, people often say that the England Gambit no longer works outside of beginner territory as people learn the trap lines. Now, I actually disagree with that assessment, and I think the England Gambit definitely works fine all the way. I'm at the moment in the 1400s ELO. I think it works very well, as we shall see in this game. Okay, so I had the black pieces in this game. An opponent led with Queen's Pawn opening, d4. What do we do against that? England Gambit with e5. So as per the opening, there's been sort of a bit of discourse sort of on chess.com, and there's a common attitude that the England Gambit's no good outside of beginners, that people learn how to refute the trap lines and then it's no good anymore. I actually kind of disagree with that. So, my opponent here is in the 1200s, I'm in the 1400s, and I still routinely win with the England Gambit because basically, so here they accept knight now forward. The best move for white is that, which is actually entering a trap line. If they play anything else, it's actually perfectly fine for black. So in this game, my opponent opted not to go down a trap line and played f4, defending the e5 pawn with another pawn. Here, we're already starting to get back approaching equality. And in this situation, the way to play for black in England Gambit is just to develop normally. One of the things about England Gambit is to rapidly accelerate development while white is fluffing around with other pieces. It takes white out of their opening preparation or their usual theory with Queen's Pawn opening. So for example, whenever you play the England Gambit, usually the Queen's Gambit type lines are not available, which means you're not going to get a Slav or semi-Slav. They can't play a London system. And so very often by move 3, by move 4, they are out of theory. And if they go into a trap line, advantage black. If they don't go into a trap line, at least they're out of theory. And it's often difficult to play for white, and for black, we just have to develop normally. So push a pawn. Let's try to, put a bit of pressure in the center. They take, develop the bishop. Okay, they push another pawn, develop the knight. Try to do knights before bishops. They push another pawn, develop my bishop. Now, this would have been slightly better with white permanently damaging some of the defenses around the king on the king side. And so, potentially immediately attacking was good. Here, I decided to play a little bit more conservatively, but here it's still potentially completely fine. Look at the evaluation, about -1. And here, all I've done is basically develop. My pieces are developed. Look at white's pieces. None of them have left their opening square. So England Gambit, completely playable, definitely into the intermediate level, especially if they avoid the trap lines. They developed bishop. Here I thought this was a potentially clever move. Stockfish didn't agree. Stockfish thought, again, because of the rapid development, to immediately attack the opponent's king. We end up trading some pieces, the pawn side structure for white get a little bit damaged, and I'm ahead. So this is really quite good for black. And here I don't even play that aggressively. So they could have blocked potentially that attack down the rook with a developing move with the knight. They didn't see that, which was fine because I was hoping that they wouldn't. And here, again, I've traded off their only developed piece. So I still have 3 pieces developed. The queen, lines are open. All of white's pieces are not developed. Queen out. Let's defend the knight with our own pawn on the queen side. They develop another knight. That's potentially good because 2 attacking pieces on the knight. So takes, take back, and of course that potentially is okay for white. However, I decided to do sort of a bit of dynamic defense, attacking the c2 pawn, which of course would come with an absolute fork of the king and rook. Stockfish, interestingly enough, isn't actually afraid of that. They think that knight takes knight is still the best move. However, here, white didn't see that. I think it's, to be perfectly honest, a pretty difficult move to see. And they decide to move king to d1 to defend that pawn. And in doing so, I've won a pretty major concession because I'm much more developed. King is now trapped in the center on the back rank because they can no longer castle. And now with one bishop move, that knight is also pinned to the king. In fact, you will see in the moves to come, it strongly recommends moving the king back to e1 to unpin that knight, because that is actually a pretty powerful tactic for white. They decide to kick my knight. That's okay. So Stockfish reckons that knight to d5 was better. Pretty subtle difference there. They developed their other knight, but remember, king cannot castle. And you can see Stockfish reckons that now that the knight is no longer attacking that piece, it should move. They should move king back to e1 to unpin that knight. I now decide to short castles. Stockfish thought that sort of developing a queen was a little bit better. Again, reasonably subtle. They pushed the pawn, but you can see that was the best move for them. And in fact, these sort of pushing moves start to give a pretty big advantage to me, to black. I decide to attack on the other side, not the best move. They move the pawn forward again. Let's block that. Finally, they move the king. So obviously, I need to do something about the knight. I opt to move it out of the way, which was good. They push their knight forward. Subtleties of this position. Apparently, knight back to b1 was best. Super difficult to see, to be perfectly honest. I now make a blunder. So I decide to push b5, thinking I attack. I thought if they took, I could take back. But in letting white infiltrate with the queen was not a good move because that bishop, of course, is also hanging. Lucky for me, they didn't see it, so that was lucky. You can see evaluation back to favoring black, and here I knew that was an issue, so take. That is not an issue because, of course, it's defended. They capture back. Knight needs to jump forward, defended by the pawn. That pawn, of course, is now also defended by the rook. Very, very nice. They jump forward now with their knight, potentially looking like they've got some attack here, you know, but I thought that was potentially okay. Part of my plan for the knights are tricky, was to give an attack on the queens. I take. Stockfish didn't think that was the most accurate move. They called it a inaccuracy. I actually thought that move was potentially fine. Now, white needs to play some very, very accurate moves for that to not work. Now, part of the problem here for me, actually, is that queen here comes with check. So that is the problem. But luckily for me, again, they didn't see it. I now did see it, so I decided to give an extra defender for that knight. They jump forward. I can see what they were doing here. Stockfish calls it a blunder. Really quite bad. Minus 5.5. I think on higher depth, it's even worse than that. It's about minus 7. And the reason for that is fairly easy to block. I'm not entirely sure why they captured anyway, but that was fine. I take. Maybe they thought they had a potential, you know, fork here, but, you know, everything's defended at the moment, and I just need to move the king out of the way to one of those two squares, which is what I did. They tried to develop the bishop, but now what I had was capture first. I expect them to capture, and now I've got a double attack on that bishop, and the bishop is pinned to the king, making that bishop lost. So I was pretty proud of that move. That move didn't really achieve very much for white. Takes, because of course it's still defended. They moved the queen again to the wrong square because knight to b2 is a royal fork, and white opted to resign at this point. At lower depth, Stockfish can see a mate in 13. There's actually a mate in 11. What might that look like? Well, obviously the king needs to move out of the way. It's in double check, and of course the queen is lost. And now it's really about infiltrating with queen and rook to create a checkmate opportunity. So the rook was there rather than taking the knight, because otherwise that would sort of accelerate mate. They sort of take now, and now the goal is to double up these two rooks. There we go. That forces a trade of rooks. So takes. In check, king has to move out of the way. I suppose I could take, but basically that's not necessary because I've got the rook and queen. Queen forces a check, king out of the way with check. King has force out of the way with check. Now forced here and mate. Good game, GG. My big takeaway from this game is that the England Gambit remains a viable option against the Queen's Pawn opening, even if white avoids the trap lines. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.